I call this October 8th Planning and Zoning regular meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. Please be sure your devices are silenced. Commissioner Hubbard, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is roll call. Clerk, would you first?
Roll call is Hornseth is excused. Charbonneau is excused. Commissioner Hubbard?
Here.
Commissioner Ullman?
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Here.
Commissioner Verhey?
Yep, here.
And Chair Griswold.
Present.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comments on any subject except those items scheduled for a public hearing. We have one public hearing coming up on outdoor commercial storage. Deputy City Clerk, has anyone signed in to speak?
No, there is no one signed up.
Is there anyone in the audience? There is no one in the audience. Okay, let's move on. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. I need a motion to approve and a second.
I make a motion to approve the agenda, the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay. Deputy City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
For approval of the agenda and consent agenda that are as follows: of the approval of the September 3rd, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes, and approval of the September 11th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission special meeting minutes. Verhey?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Ullman?
Yes.
And Chair Griswold.
Yes,
The agenda and consent agenda are approved.
thank you. Next on the agenda is special orders, presentations, and reports. There are no proclamations or awards. City Administration report. Would you like to give a report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Griswold. Starting October 1st, businesses with a City of Seward business license can now renew their business license with the city. This can be done through OpenGov, so just a reminder for the public to do that if any businesses are planning on reoperating in Seward in 2025. Trout Unlimited is the sponsor organization of a grant awarded through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to help improve fish habitat in the city of Seward. And Trout Unlimited held a meeting in Seward with local leaders on October 2nd to discuss how best to engage the public regarding developing a priority list of projects related to this grant that the community would get behind. And thank you, Chair Griswold, for attending this meeting as well. And so more information will be provided when public engagement opportunities and dates are set in stone, but it's $700,000 geared towards specifically Seward for this grant. And so we'd love to get as much public participation as possible in this process, so stay tuned. And then speaking of public engagement, the comprehensive plan public engagement surveys will be available any day now for the public, as well as a comprehensive plan website, which will be connected to the community development website on the city's webpage. And there will be, and more for the public, there will be 4 short surveys we will be asking the public to take. And so one survey will be an overarching vision of Seward survey, and then we broke down the other 3 into viewing Seward as a people, as a place, and as an economy, with a survey related to each of those. And so thank you to the commission for providing your feedback. We'll have the surveys open all winter with the goal of capturing some of that seasonal audience when they return in the spring. And we will spend this time this fall targeting as many groups as possible to help us spread the word. And we'll have the ability to analyze the data as the survey results come in. And so once we get to the spring, I think our goal is to look at some of the results we've gathered so far and host a number of town hall meetings with the public to engage in some more detailed discussions with the community based on those results. And we're ordering some marketing materials, and if we have them in on time, we plan to have a table at the Halloween Carnival, which will be fun. And we're planning to have a public engagement kind of kickoff event Wednesday, November 13th at the Tidewater Tap House, and we'll have more information to follow on that. And then lastly, more for the commission, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, but there is that training available for you all through the American Planning Association. It's their virtual Alaska specific planning commissioner training, which is Sunday, October 27th from 9 to 4 p.m., all done virtual. That deadline to register is the Friday, the October 18th, and it is free. And so I think I've sent you all the information, but let me know if I need to resend that to any of you. So hopefully many of you are able to participate. And that is my report.
Thank you very much. Next is other reports and announcements. There are none, and there are no presentations. Next is public hearings. The only public hearing is Resolution 2024-020. Deputy City Clerk, would you please read the title into the record?
Yes. Resolution 2024-020 of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Seward, Alaska, granting a conditional use permit to Robert Williams to use the unsubdivided portion of Survey 149 located at 2405 Seward Highway and Lot B1, Forest Acres Subdivision, Levy Replat, located at 2413 Seward Highway for commercial outdoor storage within an auto commercial AC zoning district. This is a quasi-judicial item. Commissioners may not discuss any items pertaining to this resolution with the applicant or commissioners or the public.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve and a second, please.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-020.
I'll second.
Thank you. Administration, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Griswold. If the Commissioner would turn to page 22 and 23 of the packet, you'll see the maps for this project that shows the location and kind of gives you a good idea of the surrounding properties and the uses that are occurring there. So this property is adjacent to the city's snow dump, which is zoned resource management, and then a small triangular property that is also owned by the city, that's zoned institutional, and the city uses it to access the snow dump. Then, of course, across the highway is the airport, and then across Dickrack Road is also resource management, currently vacant and in a flood zone. The actual property, if you look on page 23, has been raised out of the flood zone with substantial amount of fill that has been brought in the past prior to the applicant purchasing this property. The applicant is proposing to use the property primarily in these first stages for commercial storage. You may also recognize this property as being one that we've discussed earlier for a proposed land swap with the city, and those discussions are still happening, I believe, at the city manager level now. Nothing has been approved yet, but still in the process. So there's multiple stages, I know, to the applicant's plans for this property and how it will be used, and dependent, of course, on the land swap. But what we're looking at today is just the property that they currently have, 2405 Seward Highway and 2413, and the proposed use for commercial storage. The intended use right now the applicant has expressed would be boat storage as well as RV storage, and then a contractor laydown yard. Boat storage is allowed outright in the auto commercial zoning district, but the RV storage and contractor laydown yard would fall under what our land uses allowed table defines as outdoor storage, and that requires a CUP, which is why you are reviewing this application today. The proposed conditions to this CUP can be found on page 20. And just some that I want to point out, of course, would be, no camping, number 9, or habitation allowed for those RVs. It would be strictly storage. And then number 13, any areas not used for storage will be landscaped and maintained. And also 14, that since the property is located along the Seward Highway, that vegetative or some other screening would be provided to enhance that highway frontage to make an attractive highway corridor.
Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions from the commission for administration?
I do.
Claire Sullivan?
Okay, thank you, Chair Griswold. As far as the landscaping and the fencing and the rest like this, do we have a timeline for that? Because as we know, we've had to put these in CUPs before and they just never seem to get to it. Is there a way that we can possibly insert it like within 2 years, given its weather and other things like that? Is that kind of something that we might consider, or have you had conversations to that effect?
Yeah, I think that would be a reasonable thing for the commission to discuss and implement, something maybe setting a time frame from when they implement the business and have an active business license and begin using the property for the proposed use, that within that time frame of 1 year or 2 years that they need to have the
Whether it's a
landscaping
fence or whether it's
completed.
vegetation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if the commission felt that, we want the landscaping done when business starts, then that could be the timeline that the landscaping needs to be done when they first start accepting boats or RVs, whatever the commission feels would be an appropriate timeline.
Okay.
What is a contractor lay-down yard?
I think your guess is as best as mine, but the applicant is available and can explain more what type of items those would be, but I would assume items that, since we don't have a lot of hardware stores here, that a contractor could potentially purchase bulk supplies,
Materials?
put it in that yard, or equipment that they have.
Okay, let's move on to the public hearing. I'll now open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed in to speak?
There is no one signed in to speak.
And there is no one in the audience. I will now close the public hearing. As this is a quasi-judicial hearing, do any commissioners need to disclose any ex parte contact or conflict of interest? Okay, very good, thank you. Are there any comments from the commission?
Pretty much what I just said was my concern,
Would you like to make an amendment to the conditions?
With your permission, Chair Griswold, I'd like to make an amendment to the item 14 on the recommended conditions that will be, let's see, as this is a prominent property along the Seward Highway corridor, vegetative and solid slat fencing or other screening will provide along the entire highway frontage to help to establish an attractive highway corridor, period. This will be completed within 1 year of effective operation of the business.
I second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Deputy City Clerk, let's call for the roll.
Roll call for the amended of item 14 on conditions will be to be added will be completed within 1 year of the business, of the start of the business. Okay. Verhey?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Ullman?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
And Chair Griswold.
Yes.
The amended has been approved. Now back to the original resolution
Okay.
as amended.
I have a question for administration. Is the applicant on the line right now?
He's
He's on the cell phone.
Okay. I'm sorry. I did not realize you were with us. Would you like to take up to maybe 5-10 minutes to speak to your project?
I probably don't need that much time. I'm kind of new to this. I'm in the building industry, the commercial building industry down here in Las Vegas. But I'm a big fan of Seward, and all my fishing buddies are there. But basically, we were thinking that boat and RV storage would be a good thing to offer as cheap as we possibly could for people coming from Anchorage, people as far away from Anchorage, to perhaps leave their vehicles, large vehicles and boats there, and then visiting Seward in their passenger car, where they can be a little bit safer on the highway, and provide a service to that group of people, and then see how that goes. Basically, it's a little bit of a work in progress in that we didn't get open this year, so it'll be next spring. We're going to be moving the entrance back so as to not have anybody hanging out on the Seward Highway. With the actual perimeter fence will be the same, but the actual entrance, the sliding gate, will be moved back. We've paid the utility to bring in power. We have power pedestals there now. I'm not sure if we have power yet. I'll be contacting Kari at the utility to see if we actually have power, so we can have monitoring of the gates and a regulated ingress and egress, as well as cameras and such. Other than that, we've proposed a land swap with the city regarding the kind of funny sliver of land over on Hemlock and Seward Highway, while offering up the back 1 acre of the lot to the snow dump yard, which would increase that lot. So it's kind of a sequenced project. The contract laydown yard is more for people that come in the spring to do work up and down the highways. We don't have anybody signed up or anything of that nature. We did bring some power in. We are going to bring power in for lighting and such, that allow contractors to rent for the summer while they get the public works and all the road work done up and down the Seward corridor. I'm available for any questions if there are any.
Thank you. I didn't catch your name. Would you please state your name for the record?
My name's Robert Williams, and I go by Robbie Williams. I enjoy Seward when I come up there. So.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions for the applicant from the commission? Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, Robbie, this is Claire Sullivan. I'm looking at your, and maybe I just don't, maybe I'm not reading it right, but your schematic with the green, looks like parking spots or storage areas. The item that's past the driveway to the right on the paper, is that the laydown yard, or what exactly is that? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, there's four lots, or I should say there's four, like 6,000 square foot proposed fenced lots that would be, as you drive into and you turn right, that would be the fenced laydown yards for potential contractors. As you drive into the left, I believe there's 120 spots, right, with 30-foot driveways, I believe, as well.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question on that access, Robbie. One of your initial site plans showed access to Dick Graff. Did you delete that so all access will be on the Seward Highway?
That was accidentally left in. It should have said future. We don't know what we're exactly doing there yet. I think it would be something that would not be tied to this CUP, and that would happen in the future in the event that we did get action for the 4 contractor yards.
Okay. I did have concerns about that location of the driveway. It was very close to the Seward Highway. And so we do have a condition here, condition 4. But I believe since this is in the future, we probably don't need to address that at this time. Is that correct, administration?
Yeah, and I can speak to that, that driveway entrance that had been proposed for Dick Graff has not been approved by Public Works. And so the only driveway entrance that is currently approved for this property is the one on the highway. So any other future access to this property would need to be approved by the Public Works
Okay.
Director.
Okay.
And that rolling gate, we're going to propose to move that back 26 feet. So any length of trailer and vehicle would fit just fine without impeding Seward Highway.
Do you think 26 feet is enough? Some of these
plus
rigs.
what's existing.
Okay.
It's actually going to move back. I don't have the total length, but I believe it's like 90 feet.
That should do it. Right.
Yeah, we're thinking a motorhome tow and a boat. That's kind of, and if there's a full-size 53-foot tractor trailer coming in to dump off supplies for a contractor, that's the type of thing we're trying to accommodate so as not to create a problem on Seward Highway.
Right. That sounds really good. Any other questions for applicant?
Yes,
State your name so we know.
Hi, this is Rhonda Hubbard calling. I just want to clarify on the driveway. Courtney, you said that Public Works isn't approving it. Is that they won't approve it, or they just haven't at this point? Is it something that they're going to pursue, or what?
Yeah, so the driveway that you're
Off of
talking
Dick
about
Graff.
is the proposed one off Dick Graff?
Yeah,
right?
yes.
So, yeah, that would be something that the applicant would need to discuss with the Public Works Director and get his approval, and there are specific requirements, safety standards and other requirements that the Public Works Director does review in that. So I don't know if Robbie's had conversations with the Public Works Director yet, but and what conflicts or challenges the Public Works Director may see in that potential driveway access, but it would need to be approved by the Public Works Director before anything was added.
Okay, but it remains a condition.
I've had some brief discussions. I came up there and had brief discussions with Doug and Jeremy regarding the property because of the gate over on the Hemlock side. That could be a secondary fire road for fire, which Doug and Jeremy were fine with. The main entrance was what we discussed, and that would be the circulation in the event of a problem. Dick Graff Road was not spoken about at all. That should have had a future driveway. It should have been a future in the event that we get action on the property. We really don't know the actual works, anything in the right of way, Doug's made it perfectly clear that we have to get a permit.
Very good, thank you. With that in mind, I'd like to propose an amendment to the conditions. The first one is I'd like to strike condition number 4, which refers to the future driveway on Dick Graff. I don't believe we need to deal with that this time. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Deputy City Clerk?
Okay. For approval of the amending of amendment striking condition number 4 for the future driveway. Sullivan?
Yes.
Is there a discussion on this?
We whizzed right past that, but if you'd like to discuss it, sure.
I guess I'm just looking at the need for something like that because of, you're moving a lot of big equipment around and it's like you need a pass-through and another way to access and egress and exit and access the property.
We don't have approval by the Public Works
So this is just premature, it's a
director.
timing thing?
I think so.
Yeah.
He'll come back and have discussions with Public Works about where he put it, if he needs it.
Just
Done?
needs to be a condition.
Well, that's
But-
not in the proposal, so it doesn't, it's like mute right now.
So
Roll
for-
call vote, please.
For a vote of the amending the motion to amend strike condition 4 for future driveway. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ullman?
Yes.
Hubbard?
No.
Verhey?
Yes.
And Chair Griswold.
Yes.
The motion to amend has been approved.
And then a new number 4, I would like to move for amendment that the main security gate on the east side of the Seward Highway, on the east side, let's just say east side, will be moved back by at least 26 feet.
Do I have a second?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
The east side of the Seward Highway is the airport side.
Right, that's what the main entrance is. So the discussion here is
No,
that the
they're on the west
applicant,
side. They're on the west
it's
side of the
the
highway.
east side of the property.
Oh, east side of the property.
So the main
Confusing.
security
Okay,
gate
there
on
you
the
go.
east side
East side of the
will
property.
be
on
moved
the
back
Seward
at
Highway,
least
yeah.
26 feet. And this is in reference to his consideration of the safety, that he needs to get these long rigs off the highway. They shouldn't be hanging out. So the gate, the fence, there is a perimeter fence, but he will move that gate back at least 26 feet to accommodate these long rigs.
Yeah, because he was going to say about 90 feet, that he'll
Right.
have space, he'll have plenty of
Right.
space. Yeah,
Including the public right-of-way.
Yeah.
We'll have them off the highway.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, just getting that intention into a condition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have it on record. Any other comments?
Do you mind reading it again? I'm just,
Sure. So the main security gate on the east side will be moved back at least 26 feet.
East side of the property.
yeah, I feel like the east side is making it confusing.
East side of the property?
East side
Yeah,
of the
Okay.
property
yeah,
along the
some way to
Seward Highway.
define
Okay.
it.
Let's call that a friendly amendment. Clarification amendment.
Yeah.
So approving to amend the motion to move the main security gate on the east side of the property along the Seward Highway will be moved back at least 26 feet. Hubbard?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Verhey?
Yes.
Ullman?
Yes.
And Chair Griswold.
Yes.
Okay, that amendment has been approved.
And then I would like to make a further amendment for condition number 5. If there is a ditch, a culvert will be installed under the north driveway to provide adequate drainage. That is no longer applicable, so I would like to move to delete condition number 5. Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. And the reason here is that this was a corollary to number 4, which, the old number 4, which we deleted. There is no There is no driveway on the north side of the property on Dick Graff. So we don't need to discuss a ditch.
Thank you for the clarification.
It's no longer
Yep,
relevant.
I got you. Yep. I
Okay,
got
it's
it.
just no longer relevant at this time.
Got it.
True, but is there ever going to be a requirement to have him build that?
Right. And that will be between Public Works and the applicant.
But we don't have any authority to mandate that condition.
I don't think it'd be appropriate this time because it's not part of the plan. Does that make sense?
It does, because what you're doing is, if he had not introduced that at all initially, that it might be something that happened and it's not part of the plan, it's sort of like it never really was even there, because you can't put a condition on something that's not part of the existing application, I think. Because you can speculate as to what a variety of things are, and you can put a lot of those conditions, but if it's not part of the plan, it seems a little bit unnecessary. And that's how I sort of look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
So just as with the original number 4, we don't know exactly where that driveway will be in the future. He has to work with Public Works to determine where it's safe to put it. And so we
But
can't,
without anything, I'm sorry.
yeah, we can't really require these conditions on something that's hypothetical.
Chair Griswold, I have a quick
Yes.
question though, reference to what you were saying. Would he have to come up with another application for a CUP for that added part of the property of some sort? Because you're modifying the existing CUP.
Good
Yeah.
question.
So they might have to do something, what you're referencing, if he's trying to do that eventually in the future. Is that a,
Right, so the CUP primarily is addressing the proposed use of the property. Of course, the driveways are, access to that use, but him adding a driveway wouldn't be changing the use of the property for commercial storage. So that it wouldn't come back to the commission if he ended up getting approval from
okay.
Public Works Director for that driveway. Once we approve this CUP, as long as the use stays commercial storage, then as far as driveway accesses on potentially Hemlock or a Dick Graff, that would all just go through Public Works Director.
So it's just more of an administrative change to facilitate whatever we've already approved? Okay.
But there's not
It's
going to be,
completely logical to expect a culvert under that approach, by the way.
Yeah, makes sense.
We weren't allowed to visit the site, so we don't really know if there's a ditch or not. It's very quasi-judicial. But I appreciate the question, Commissioner Sullivan, and also administration's response. That's it for me. Are there any other amendments to the commission?
So do we
Well,
need
this
to,
we
we
still
need to.
have this.
Oh, we still need to vote.
Yeah,
Vote
I-
for this one.
Yeah,
I
that
guess-
went on a while.
just a final comment, I
Sure.
just, there's really not going to be any requirement. I mean, if there's something not holding him to that, which I think is very necessary, then, I mean, why would he want to spend the money to build a driveway?
Well, these, like the applicant said, there are requirements that the Public Works would enforce for driveways. And so a culvert would be something that Public Works would require with that permit.
Sure, but why would he even want to introduce a driveway?
Right, that would be the applicant's prerogative, he can.
Right, so, yeah.
That's outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Are we ready for the vote?
Voting to motion to amend to delete condition number 5. Hubbard,
No.
Hornseth?
He's gone.
Oh, sorry. Got to cross them off. Ullman,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Verhey,
Yes.
and Chair Griswold.
Yes,
That amendment has been approved.
thank you. Are there any other amendments to this conditional use permit? Looks good, okay. Deputy City Clerk, would you please call for a roll?
So
Roll call on the main motion.
calling to approve Resolution 2024-020 with all the amendments. Ullman,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Verhey,
Yes.
and Chair Griswold.
Yes,
That resolution has been approved.
okay. Moving on to unfinished business. We have no unfinished business. Next on the agenda is new business. First, we have Resolution 2024-021. Would the Deputy City Clerk please read the title into the record?
Resolution 2024-021 of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Seward, Alaska, recommending City Council support the Kenai Peninsula Borough Assembly approval of the 2024 Kenai Peninsula Borough Hazard Mitigation Plan update, which will include the City of Seward and the City of Seldovia.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve and a second.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-021.
I'll second.
Very good. Administration, do you have any comments?
Yes. So I can't remember the work session, the precise date of the work session, but in early spring, I believe, we had the work session with the borough to discuss the hazard mitigation plan draft. They have completed the draft stage and are now in the approval stages. And one of the requirements they need prior to assembly approval is to gain the recommendation from the cities that are included in this plan. So historically, the City of Seward had their own hazard mitigation plan, as well as the Seward Bear Creek Flood Service Area. And they were separate from the borough's hazard mitigation plan. The city has been advocating with the borough to combine our hazard mitigation plans for some time, and we have been able to finally do that. And so the borough, in their update of their hazard mitigation plan, now includes the City of Seward and the Seward Bear Creek Flood Service Area. We do have Joe, who has been working with this plan with the borough. He's called in, and we'll have him here for any questions that you may have, as well as we didn't include the draft plan for the hazard mitigation plan in the packet because it is 256 pages. So if you didn't notice already that it is on our website, if you want to look through it and for interest's sake, and I'm not sure if the comment period is still open, but if there was anything you noticed that you want to comment to the borough, it is there for your review.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from the commission?
I listened to because I wasn't on the board or the commission at that time. It was May 21st, and I went back and listened to the board. I just had a couple of questions, and Courtney had sort of, had answered them. I was concerned about our Seward Flood Board and the mitigation program, if any of those guys would be, carved out once it's gone to the borough. And she said, no, everything will be still considered. There'll be people participating, and so I think it's just a great idea that we're going to be part of the greater Kenai Peninsula Hazard Mitigation Program.
Thank you. I noticed that the August draft didn't have any updates. I submitted a lot of comments, and Joe, I don't know, is this the update that's going to go to the Kenai Peninsula Borough for approval, or are you still updating it to correct things?
So the August draft that was for public review included the comments, integrated the comments, and I believe I should have sent a link to the community planner to review the draft that the state will be reviewing, but there's a multi-step process, so there's the state review and the FEMA review, but the comments have been included within the appendix and integrated where necessary.
Interesting. Okay, well, I spent a great deal of time reviewing that, and I was kind of disappointed that I didn't see any changes that I made. But be that as it may, I think the overall intent to incorporate the City of Seward and the Bear Creek Flood Service Area Board are excellent, and I appreciate that integration. So, any further discussion? Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Approving Resolution 2024-021. Olman,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Verhey,
Yes.
and Chair Griswold.
Yes,
That resolution has been approved.
thank you. Joe, you're welcome to listen to the rest of our meeting, or you're welcome to go about your other business at this time.
Thank you, and just to clarify, so the plan will move on to the council for a meeting next week, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Appreciate your being on the phone. Next on, thanks, bye-bye. Next on the agenda is Resolution 2024-022. Deputy City Clerk, would you please read the title into the record?
Resolution 2024-20022 of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Seward, Alaska, recommending Kenai Peninsula Borough approval of the preliminary plat of the original town site of Seward, lots 12, 13, 14, and north a half of lot 15, block 15, located at 313 and 315 4th Avenue, creating lot 14A, Seward Original Town Site, Weissel replat.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve and a second.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-022.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Administration, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair Griswold. The location for this plat, the commission may recognize as the same location where the proposed CUP for the hotel was located. Although the CUP failed, the applicant still has intentions to develop this property in the future, hopefully. And Seward City Code 12.01.030 prohibits any building except a single-family home to be constructed across platted property lines. So in anticipation and planning for future development of this property, the applicant, Mr. Weissel, has started the replat process, which you'll see on page 44 of the packet, which requires him to vacate those interior lot lines and create one parcel, so that any future construction will not be across platted property lines.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the commission?
This makes good sense.
Makes good sense. It's a very straightforward proposal. Okay. Deputy City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Approving Resolution 2024-022. Olman,
Yes.
Verhey,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
and Chair Griswold.
Yes.
That resolution has been approved.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is other new business. We have a special city attorney discussion on quasi-judicial proceedings with questions and answers from the commission. Okay, would you please introduce yourself? Can you hear us?
Yeah, this is Robert Coleman.
Thank you, Robert. Can you hear us?
I sure can.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
It's a little faint, but if we,
Let me see if I can change
Oh,
it.
we got the
there we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think we can all hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, and am I good to start?
Yes, you are.
All right, well, yes, big thank you, and I want to just reach out and say thank you to your staff, Clara, Courtney, and Danny. Have been fantastic to work with, and hopefully this evening's presentation is helpful to all of you. And my goal tonight is to cover somewhere between 6 to 10 slides, have a little bit of discussion, and then if there's a bunch of questions, I'd be glad to entertain them throughout the presentation. And then if there's more questions afterwards, I'd be happy to come back and even show up in person and say hello and do a follow-up, if that works, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a quick introduction of me. I am a new attorney to the law firm that represents the city for the last 11 years, I've worked in Juneau. Prior 6, I was the city attorney, and hearing your meeting tonight actually brought back fond memories because the first 5 years I was in Juneau, I was the attorney assigned to the Planning Commission, and Tuesday nights were the night that I got to spend long hours with the Planning Commission, and you seem to move a little faster than the commission in Juneau, but I won't tell them that. And then prior to that, I actually worked in private practice representing developers and landowners trying to get permits, and so it's been a fun career for me to be able to dance on both sides and help people as they come through this process. And tonight, I just want to say thank you to Clara to help work through these slides. So if we can go to the next slide, it should say a one sentence in the middle. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's one thing to remember tonight, and you all have been doing a fantastic job, just as I sat through your meeting, is the ultimate goal for your quasi-judicial decisions, so your conditional use permit and your variance permit decisions as examples, is you want to make sure the applicant and the public, and I even put in here other commissioners, are entitled to a fair and impartial hearing in a decision. So if you keep those ultimate concepts in mind, the rest of the presentation kind of flows from there. We can go to the third slide. And feel free to interrupt if you have any questions, and I'll try to pause at the end of each slide as well. So when I say quasi-judicial, what I mean is it's when you sit as a body and you decide a specific permit. That's a little different than, say, the resolution you evaluated over the Kenai Peninsula Borough plan. That would be more of the quasi-legislative hat. And so when you're in that quasi-judicial hat, there's slightly different rules that apply. And there's 3 things that apply, and it might help, and you may have heard this metaphor in the past, that you're going to act like a judge or a juror. And so the applicant and any interested neighbors or members of the public, and then, like I said, a little bit of commissioners, everybody's entitled to have an impartial decision maker make their decision. People are entitled to notice of your meetings and reasonable opportunities to participate. And you have some great rules. I saw a phenomenal set of questions from the chair, and there's, let's say, 10 rules that the commission has right now that embody those 3 concepts. And there's definitely nuances, and this body has definitely experienced that in the past. I've seen some of the past hearings that you've had, that it's a little challenging. Things like reconsideration or rescinding a vote. Like when can you make those motions, and how do you satisfy the due process notice requirements? Those specific instances are a little tricky, and so I'm going to try to help provide some overarching guidance, but I don't want to get bogged down into specifics of specific fact patterns, because I'm just trying to provide that overview for you, and then if there's something specific, we can work with your staff and answer those questions or defend you going forward. Are there any questions on kind of this overarching concept before we dive in?
Nothing good.
All right, we can go to the next slide. It should say quasi-judicial information flow. So one of the challenges that we all face in a small community is making decisions based on information that's presented to you. So it's especially important when you're sitting quasi-judicial hat that you make decisions only based on the information that's presented during the hearing. So that would include material that's in the staff report, that would include answers to questions that you have, presentations by staff, argument or questions or facts presented by members of the public, and then also the applicant's presentation and rebuttal to questions that the commission has. So the ultimate goal is that when you walk into that hearing or walk into a conditional use permit meeting with a resolution in front of you, that you still have an open mind, you haven't made up your mind, you haven't listened to the evidence that's presented, and then by the time the meeting is, or that item is over and your roll call happens,
that's the time when you can definitely have make your vote, and if you want to make comments, the chair has definitely given the body permission to do that on multiple occasions tonight. But that also means that if you didn't find out the information during the hearing, you may have what's called ex parte information. And I'll just describe or define ex parte as a concept that means without the other side present. So you can think of it as maybe private information. Most commonly, we think of it as communication. So you talk to, for example, the applicant before the meeting. That would be ex parte communication. But it can also be things like you do, you happen to drive by wherever this development is, and you stop and you look and you stare and you understand what's kind of happening at that moment when you're there. That can also be ex parte information. So information that you gained without the applicant or the members of the public present during the hearing. So that's what we're talking about. And, more specifically, sources of information that could lead to ex parte contact would be from the applicant. That's definitely the most common. Could be from a neighbor or some other interested person like a business partner or a competitor. It could also be from the media, and this is what's tricky. The chair had a question, do commissioners lose their rights by being commissioners? And the short answer is no. But some of your rights are definitely limited by being a commissioner for a small period of time. And so one of the next slides that I have, we'll talk about this, but if you sense that you're getting exposed to ex parte communication, whether it's a radio, whether it's a news source online, or perhaps some print media, if you can make the connection that it's something that's coming in front of the commission, just quickly stop and just stop reading it and then wait for it to come up when it gets presented at a commission meeting. And then I put a question mark here for community development department staff. In general, staff is neutral. They're not associated with the applicant or against the applicant, with the neighbor or against the neighbor. And so they can be a source of information. However, there are certain things that even staff can give you that would be considered ex parte information. I'll talk about on the next slide. So I'll pause here if there's any questions before we go.
This is Claire Sullivan. I have a quick question. If you're just asking for clarification, say something on your packet, and you contact the community development department, and then we have the meeting, do they need to have to bring it up that you had that conversation with them, or is it just, does that make it an ex parte thing necessarily if you've got additional information that wasn't specifically provided in the packet or in, around the dais?
Yeah, no, thank you. Let me jump to the next slide, if I can, and it's at the bottom of this next slide. So let me skip the top stuff and go directly to your question. So at the very bottom. So if you ask a question to planning staff and it's about procedural information, like when was the application submitted, or when did the packet get published, or like that sort of stuff, relatively benign material, and especially material that if you nose around super hard, you could probably track it down, even though it may be hard to track down online. That type of information is usually okay, not ex parte. If your question is for, let's say, a code reference, so a simple substantive piece of information, that's also usually okay. But if the question gets to more detailed information and analysis, so for example, staff, can you give me the most recent application that we did for a camping conditional use permit? I want to see the staff report. I want to see the resolution. That type of information is usually material that's so substantive that even though staff is neutral, that material is being introduced outside of the hearing, and so the best practice would be for staff to disclose that in the packet prior to the meeting if possible. That way everybody can know that this was a question that was potentially relevant to another commission. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So I'll jump back to the top of this slide. Remember, the overarching concept is fairness and impartiality, and these kind of four items on top kind of summarize the progression of ex parte communication. So if you can avoid being exposed to it in the first place, that's fantastic, that's the best. If you inadvertently get exposed to something and you can stop the conversation early or stop your exposure early, that's okay. That's probably not even have to disclose. But if at some point, and you know, this may sound subjective, unfortunately this is probably reviewed by a court in a little bit more objective perspective, and so there's a little bit of gray here, but at some point it gets too late, like you've been exposed to too much information, or the conversation's happened too long and you started to form an opinion. That's the point, that's the type of material that we want to disclose in the packet or disclose as soon as possible at a hearing, so everybody knows about it and can, you know, make arguments or make facts or to counter it or adjust it or adapt to it. Usually, as long as you disclose that early enough, you're still okay, and assuming you can still be neutral and fair. But at some times, and I've had this experience when I was defending the Planning Commission in Juneau, or when I was in front of planning commissions in Washington and other locations, sometimes the exposure has been too high, and you just know way too much information, and you no longer can be neutral and fair, and you have to recuse yourself, and at that point you're disqualified. So that's the progression. And so our goal is for all 7 of you, or 5 of you tonight, to be able to be present, be able to adjudicate each of the permits that come in front of you. And so we want to be in that early category. We want to avoid ex parte. We want to stop it from happening. Or if it does happen, if it's still early enough, we want to disclose it so you can still be neutral and fair, because your voice is important. And we, you know, the council wants you to make decisions, and that's why you're there. And it's much easier to make decisions when all 7 of you are present. So kind of as examples, if you're in a grocery store and somebody comes up to you and starts talking about something, you know, most of you probably do this already. You know, the easy line is, I can't discuss the permit application. Please attend and comment at the commission hearing. Things get a little tricky with emails and phone calls when they're individual to you. And remember, we're only in the quasi-judicial realm, so when you're making permit decisions, and this is different, I just want to make this contrast quickly. When you're in that quasi-legislative round, or the legislative realm that the council's in a lot of times, when you're talking about an overarching, let's say, plan for Seward, or a comprehensive plan for the borough, or for potential code amendments to the land use code or the subdivision code, you're expected to actually talk to members of the public. But when we're in that quasi-judicial realm, we can't. And so if you get one of those phone calls, you have to take a step and, okay, is this a quasi-judicial piece or is this a legislative piece? And you have to make that threshold determination. And if it's a permit decision, then, you know, that line from the grocery store, it can be used. I can't discuss the permit now. Please attend and comment at the hearing. I take a deep breath on this next one because it's a little tricky. So, can commissioners talk to other commissioners on quasi-judicial items? The legal answer is yes. There's some deep hesitation in my voice because it can get tricky and you can get into trouble if you do it. Can it happen? Yes. And so remember on the Open Meetings Act, if you're in a quasi-legislative item, you can only talk to no more than 3 commissioners. And so if somebody forgets, and let's say 2 commissioners talk to another commissioner, and you're back in the quasi-legislative realm, and then somebody has a chain conversation with somebody else, a telephone conversation with somebody else, then you violated the Open Meetings Act on that quasi-legislative realm. And the other issue is that some commissioners don't want to talk to other commissioners. They want to have their own opinions and their own questions before a meeting, and then ask all their questions during the meeting. And so some individual commissioners may not want to talk. And so I hesitate here to put this out on paper, but I do feel like there's an ethical duty to have this conversation. So I don't know if this jogged any questions or statements by members of the commission, I'll definitely stop here and pause.
Robert, this is Rhonda Hubbard, and I was wondering, you'd mentioned earlier about even if you do a drive-by a property, that could be considered ex parte. And is that really, I'm kind of a context person, and if I see property, I'd like to see the property that we're talking about, and you're saying that does that qualify as an ex parte piece of information?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. It definitely can. So if you do a drive-by, for example, you get to see material, you get to see things, even if you're on the public road and you're not, trespassing or moving onto private property. You get to see things that are not presented at the hearing. And so, in general, that would qualify for ex parte information. The question comes up is, have you seen so much that you've formed opinions that no other commissioner has that no other commissioner has access to based on information that you saw? And so for something like that, you definitely should disclose that you did a drive-by and saw whatever you saw, and then you'd have to make the statement whether you think you can be neutral and fair with the applicant and the neighboring property owners at the hearing.
Well, doesn't the drive-by help produce some evidence of what you're talking about? And wouldn't that be important to all the people or all the other commissioners as well as the public?
Yeah, good question. So what I think the crux of what you're getting at is you feel like you need that information to do your job as a commissioner at the hearing. And so either the applicant or staff needs to bring that information to the hearing. So, for example, if, in general, the applicant has the burden to persuade you to grant, for example, a conditional use permit, the applicant is the one who would have the burden to include pictures in their packet or to include some drawings or schematics or topographic layout of their site, maybe some, even sketch drawings of what the land looks like today, to paint that picture so you can feel comfortable adjudicating their permit. And if the applicant doesn't, and staff thinks that it's important for staff's presentation and staff's packet material, staff can definitely do it. But it really needs to be information that's presented during the hearing.
This is Carol Griswold. I was thinking that for every quasi-judicial matter, we should just routinely schedule an optional field trip, official field trip, either the day of the meeting or the week before the meeting. Invite the public, give all that public due process notice. Just say, if you'd like to join the commission, we're going to meet Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. And then whoever wants to show up could show up. And then minutes would be taken, I understand, for an official meeting, which is a field trip. And then you could actually be at the site. And it would be an open meeting, so would you be able to discuss it, what you're seeing? Because the public would be invited and commissioners, anyone would be invited. And that way, you wouldn't have to depend on the applicant to paint an accurate picture, which they may not, and everyone would get to see the site legally. Is that an option?
It is an option, and I think I submitted some draft responses to one of your questions, and there's a long response on this topic in there. Field trips can be legal, but again, I got some hesitation in my voice, and you nailed a number of the concerns, some of the issues. So notice to the public and to the applicant, and then obviously there has to be some way to keep minutes of what happened, and then it has to be set up in a way such that the public can listen to what you're saying and see what's happening. But there's also, especially for quasi-judicial decisions, there's also some big hesitations, because sometimes the applicant is not ready for a site visit for various reasons, or sometimes the applicant is really wants a site visit because there's something happening with a neighboring lot that they want to show you. There can also be protest issues that pop up and signs that pop up. You can definitely do a site visit. I'm not aware of anybody that routinely does them, but that's not to say that some municipality doesn't. And what I have seen is for really significant community projects, really some important conditional use permit, I have seen a site visit for like that type of event, like maybe once a year or once every couple years. But I've not seen something set up on a routine basis because there's a lot of staff workload that goes into making that happen. I'm not sure where the staff load is right now.
Those are really good considerations, but you can probably hear our frustration about making decisions without a lot of information. And often the applicant's application is very sketchy and we have no idea what he's talking about, and it's really different in reality. So, okay, well that's good to know.
I also want to add that Seward's a pretty small town, and we're driving by projects that are applicant projects or potential projects all the time. They're in our neighborhood, they're on Main Street. Since I've been on this as a commissioner since, May? There's been 5 of them, I think, or so that, I just can't help but see them. And I'm not going to close my eyes when I'm driving, so I don't know. I just think that's a little much just to be able to go and observe a piece of property and have a problem with that.
Yeah, I'm not. No, thank you. I'm not suggesting when you're driving on a main route, to and from whatever you need to do, that you have to close your eyes. I'm not suggesting that at all. But what I'm suggesting is don't go out of your way to do a site visit unless you're ready to disclose that you went there and this is what you saw, and then the follow-up is a statement whether you can continue to be neutral and fair.
Hey Rob, this is Danny. Just to kind of sum that up, going back to the whole fairness side of it, if you go out of your way to formulate an opinion outside of the public discourse, that would be unfair to the applicant and other commissioners, is how I'm interpreting that.
That's definitely the concept, and because the other piece I would add is because a neighbor or a property owner or interested party can appeal your decision to the council, it could also be unfair to them.
Okay, great, thanks.
I had a question on a pending quasi-judicial matter. If you know that it's going to come back, is it okay for the commission to discuss that project with the applicant, even though it hasn't come before us, but we know it's pending? Is that okay to discuss it?
Yeah, good question. So a little bit more facts would be helpful. So are you thinking of discussing it during a commission meeting or discussing it individually with the applicant outside of a commission?
Privately.
Yeah. So so if it was a private discussion that you knew it was coming up, in general, that would be ex parte communication that you would then have to deal with at the hearing. So this is one of those scenarios where I think of it as being fair to the other commissioners. So if you have that conversation, most likely you're going to have to disclose it and then have to make that statement whether you can be neutral and fair. The chair would then have to make a ruling on whether or not the chair believes that, and the rest of the commission can overrule that. But many times, if there's been a detailed conversation with an applicant ahead of time, you may get disqualified. And especially if a neighbor knows about or another interested party knows about it, that would be a prime case to appeal something and then say, no, the commission wasn't neutral and fair. City council, you have to remand it, or if it goes up to court, you have to remand it or decide how to restart this whole process.
Very good. And what if you are a friend with the applicant? Would that be immediate grounds for disqualification, or would you have to state that you can be fair and unbiased despite your friendship?
Yeah, great question. So maybe set it up like this. If you like watching sports and occasionally you end up in the same house or venue with somebody watching a sports team event, so they're kind of a light touch friend, that's a different scenario than if you have dinner with them 2-3 times a week, or they're next door neighbors and you go on vacations with them a lot. So under the first example, if it's a light touch friend, that's probably something you just disclose at the beginning of the hearing and say, I have a small acquaintance with this individual, but I can still be neutral and fair. I don't think my relationship implicates my impartiality. Then obviously the chair makes a ruling. And then on the second one, if you have a really close relationship with somebody, this is one of those questions, can you be fair to the other commissioners and then to the public as a whole, but can you honestly be impartial and neutral and fair to everybody else? And if you think you can, then say so. But if you can't, it's also okay to say, I need to recuse myself because of this conflict.
Thank you very much. The other question to this point is, you were talking about all the evidence needs to be presented at the public hearing. So we had a case recently where we extended the meeting to another time, and more information came in after the public hearing was closed. Would you advise that only information that was received during the public hearing should be allowed as evidence?
Yeah, good question. So I don't want to look backwards because I don't think it's probably in my best interest to do that, but I can spin this around and look forward. So I had a similar question that came up, and I think there's a response in the draft that I sent out to the staff. And I am super aware of the practical realities that if a commission meeting happens, let's say on a Tuesday night, and for whatever reason it's continued to another meeting, whether it's a special meeting a couple days later or our next regular meeting 2 weeks later on a Tuesday night, that gap in time sets up a natural response for people to present you with more information. And so under the normal rules, if you've closed public testimony at the original meeting, then no new information is allowed in. However, if at that next meeting, whether it's a special meeting or the next regular meeting when the item is brought back up on the continuation of old business, and you are presented with new information, the commission has the discretion to allow that information in. And you have to weigh, is there sufficient notice to the applicant if it's material coming in from neighbors? Is there sufficient notice to neighbors if it's material coming in from the applicant? Is the material that's being asked for you to consider super important that if you don't include it into the record and don't allow it in, that you might get overruled by the council or a court if this gets appealed? Or is it so important that you need to continue the meeting to another meeting because notice issues are complicated? I just raise those issues because there's an easy bright line rule to say no new information. But the practical reality is that with the passage of time, something will come in that people think is super important. And the commission has to make that decision, whether you allow it in and for what reasons are you doing it to satisfy the due process. Is it fair to the applicant? Is it fair to the members of the community? And what happens next? Does that help?
Right, deciding if it's fair is really important.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Rob? This is Danny again, because a lot of times that information will be sent to our office, and so you're saying that the commission needs to make that distinction. How is that done practically? If, the meeting's over, we're not meeting the commission until the next meeting, we're getting the information. And so, I know you don't want to look backwards, but in this last one, it kind of felt like it was kind of up to us to decide if that information was going to be disseminated to the commission ahead of time so the public could get access to it. And so I'm just curious if you have any practical applications of what that can look like in the future for the commission to be able to make that discretion.
Yeah, no, definitely, thank you. These are some of those tricky scenarios. So I have experienced this maybe both ways or in two ways. One, I've seen staff not feel comfortable at all putting it in a packet, and actually at the subsequent meeting, planning commission meeting, then presenting it to the entire commission all at once. The commission then makes a decision what to do. I've seen the commission say, nope, we're not including it, and we're going to make our decision. I've also seen the commission say, yes, we're going to include it, but that means we're going to continue the meeting again because now we've let new information in that nobody else saw. So for due process reasons, we need to continue the meeting to a third meeting. I have also seen a different strategy where staff presents that information to the chair. Usually it's the planning commission chair, but sometimes if the chair is absent, whoever's the presiding officer of the planning commission, and that chairperson makes the decision whether it gets included or not. And then at that subsequent meeting, the chair states, staff received this information. I made a decision that it needs to be included, which is why it's in the packet. It's up to the whole body to overrule me if the body so chooses, otherwise it's coming in. And the chair has that prerogative through various rules. And so, any of those options can, I think it just really depends on the specific facts that you're faced with. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Any other questions at this time? Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please.
Yeah, next slide. This is number 6. It should have a title that says Ex parte Communications Best Practices. And we might be able to go through this fairly quick. We talked about this concept a few times. So we try to avoid ex parte contact, but if we can't, if something is de minimis, so using kind of a Latin phrase there, so maybe think of it as small potatoes, not a big piece of information, not an extensive conversation. So if something's small ex parte contact you want to disclose, we try to disclose prior to the hearing so other people can see it, so it's in writing, but occasionally that can't happen for a variety of reasons. And then you want to disclose it orally at the hearing, so the best time to do that would be after the chair asks the clerk to read the title. There might be some other conflict questions that come up, but that would be a good time to give the chair a heads up to say, hey, I'd like to disclose a potential ex parte contact, and then briefly describe it to whatever extent you feel like you need to, or the rest of the commission feels like you need to, and then the chair, or excuse me, you would need to state whether you could still be neutral and fair. And this is where things get a little tricky. Alaska is definitely a small state, and we have had a very active litigant in Homer, might be a relation to somebody, who has helped clarify some of these rules. And the Alaska Supreme Court has suggested that if there's no objection, that commissioner can participate. Usually that's okay. But if there is an objection, whether it's by a member of the public, the applicant, or another commissioner, then the whole commission gets to decide what to do. So the chair would make a ruling, and then that ruling could be overruled by the rest of the body. And then finally, if it's extensive ex parte contact, again, you'd have to disclose that, and then you're likely disqualified, but there's a little bit of gray in that area. So the chair or the whole body could make a decision on that one. Any questions on the best practices and kind of the three processes here, depending on the type of ex parte involvement?
Robert, could you clarify when the public or other commissions would raise those objections?
Yeah, no, great question. So in general, it would be one of the first things that the body deals with. So the best practice is, if the chair says, we're ready to move to the next item, clerk call, read the title into the record, please. At that next moment would be a great time to address any sort of ex parte issues. I'll put in parentheses here, it's also a good time to talk about any conflicts of interest, because an ex parte issue or a conflict of interest can be a threshold matter, and maybe 2 slides from now we'll get there depending on where the body wants to go. But if that commissioner asks questions, let me back it up a little bit. So if that commissioner does not raise the ex parte issue immediately, and then is allowed to ask questions and participate in the back and forth with staff, participate in the back and forth with the applicant, members of the public, or have a discussion with other commissioners, sometimes that alone can taint the entire process to undo it. And so the best practice is to raise and address any ex parte issues or conflicts of interest as early as possible.
And then a member of the audience, if we had any, would say, Chair, I would like to make an objection to the commissioner's lack of
participation.
Yeah, to his participation. I believe they've had ex parte contact or conflict of interest. So then would we just suspend the rules and allow that to happen, or?
Yeah, no, question. So this is one of those tricky scenarios that a lot of rules and procedures don't carve this process out very well.
Okay.
But in general, if I could help think, sitting as a potential chair or presiding officer for a conditional use permit hearing, if I say, okay, we're ready to address the next topic, clerk, would you please read the title in? And then I pause for a second, and then another commissioner says, Chair, I have a potential of interest I need to disclose, or potential ex parte issue I need to disclose. I would look to that person and say, okay, your scenario, they explain the scenario. I might ask, can you be neutral and fair, or do you think, if the person says, I've had too much, I'm out. If somebody says they're out, that's one of those realms where you probably need to let them go. But if they think they can be neutral and fair, I would look to the body, say any objections if that individual stays on, and then you can even ask the question, look to the public to say any objections of this person staying on.
That's good.
And if there's no objections, then you would move on.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, it does.
We can go to the next slide, and it has a whole bunch of words, and I'm going to skip over this slide. Some of you might find it of interest in the future. I want to go to slide 8. This is, say, case law example, Griswold, 1996. I don't believe this has anything to do with our current chair, but possibly a relative of some sorts. This is kind of a nice example in the quasi-legislative realm how a conflict or an ex parte issue can come up. And so I just want to go through a little bit of a summary on this one to give you a sense that's not a specific Planning and Zoning Commission issue to Seward, but something that another community dealt with. So that this is a legislative topic. So this is a zoning ordinance, a rezone for auto sales on some lots in downtown Homer, or in the Homer area, I should say. And the Planning Commission in that community had some process. There was a non-conforming use determination, and then there was a rezone hearing and process in front of the Planning Commission. And ultimately, this rezone topic gets in front of the Homer City Council as an ordinance, and the council adopts the ordinance and allows auto sales on 13 lots. And it passes 5-0. I have a star here to say that there was one council member who lived on one of those 13 lots, so keep that in mind. And then An interested party, Mr. Griswold, filed suit alleging, amongst a whole bunch of other things, a conflict of interest and challenge to the impartial decision-making of the government. So this is not a planning commission appeal, but I think this gives you some idea of what happens next. So we can go to the next slide. The Alaska Supreme Court, so this slide should be titled AK Analysis Griswold 1996, so Alaska Supreme Court Analysis 96. On the specific topic of what happens when a person who lives on one of these lots doesn't disclose that they live there and then puts on it. The Alaska Supreme Court kind of identified 3 rules. And the court said, if that individual casts the decisive vote, then the entire action is invalid. So the entire rezoning ordinance would be invalid. If, alternatively, if they did not cast the decisive vote, but they failed to disclose their conflict or, going with our theme, an ex parte communication, then the rezone ordinance or the action is likely invalid. So it's a presumption that the activity is invalid. So, if it's going back to the example of a potential super close friend, or, if you have a personal interest in something or a substantial financial interest in something, or if you've had ex parte contact, any of those things, if you fail to disclose that at the beginning of the hearing, then presumptively that permit decision is invalid. And then the court said the third alternative is if the member did not cast the decisive vote and the member disclosed, then the action is likely valid unless the conflicted member created such an intolerable appearance of impropriety. So the court's saying, if you don't cast the decisive vote and you disclose, in general, action is valid. Although there's a small amount to say it may not be. So I just use this as an example. Granted it's in a legislative context, but I think the court would adopt, and has in other cases since then, adopted the same or similar analysis to ex parte communication. And so that's why this topic is so tough, and especially tough in a small community like Seward or Ulmer or some of our other communities in Alaska, where you do drive by some waste development, or you do have super close friends, and we can go to community events or dinners or sporting events where somebody will say something or you'll be exposed. And so I think if you can just remember that first slide that we talked about, that the whole concept is to be neutral and fair, and to the applicant, to the other members of the public and the commissioners, I think if you keep those concepts in mind, I think you'll be just fine. So I'll stop there and say thank you. The prime partner that normally you might see, Sam Severin, is hanging out in YouTube land, and I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. I'd be glad to answer questions, and like I said, if there's something that comes up, I'd be happy to come back at a future time and help you.
Thank you very much. This is really educational. Any questions from the commissioners?
I don't think so.
Okay. I appreciate your offer to educate us further. Okay.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Okay, next, under other new business, is a discussion on the work session topics for the next work session on Wednesday, October 23rd. We have the options of housing and marijuana regulation. First topic is housing administration. Do you have any recommendations?
Do you mind if I talk about both of them?
Well, I would prefer that. I'm just trying to follow the agenda. It was separated out that way.
Sure.
But talking about both of them at the same time would be better.
Okay. Yeah, so we kind of were thinking that these two topics would be good for the next two work sessions. One, going back to the marijuana establishment regulations, because we did at some point let the public know that we would be having another conversation in the fall, so to stay on track with that. And then housing, I think, is just that's just the important issue that I think we can continue the conversation that we had at the last work session. And so we kind of pulled some of the topics, parking, accessory apartments or accessory dwelling units, parking and building height. You know, when we think about parking or building height, those are things that, you know, if we're gonna have a conversation, it's better to do it sooner than later so future developers know what they're working with. ADUs, I know Commissioner Hornstedt is not here, but he's done some research on that topic, and that just in my short tenure seems to be one of the more common questions, issues, concerns that we have about people utilizing ADUs. And so I think there's some, at least room for a conversation there. And then we didn't really get to do this at the last work session, but we had all of the land uses related to housing. And I think it would be good to go through those at some point and just to say, hey, what's relevant, what's worth another future conversation. And then again, going back to Title 16 and the assessment districts, and if that's something the commission wants to look at to kind of prevent developers in code from pushing utility extensions and improvements onto future lot owners versus bringing those themselves so that lot owners can buy ready to go buildable lots. And so kind of, you know, and again, that might not all be covered in one work session, but we can start with that group or any other ones. And then again, marijuana regulation, establishment regulations, to continue that conversation now that the ordinance was accepted about changing the layout in the land use table. We have the ability to go line by line through, all right, these are the current land uses, this is where they're allowed. How do we feel about that? We're good with it, or do we want to look at recommending a change to City Council? So all that to say, some considerations for the next two work sessions. Just a reminder that November we canceled our meeting because of the national election, and so we're doing a double header on the 19th of November, which will limit the work session time. So just keep that in mind. So October will be a full work session, and we've got that whole runway to work with as long as the commission would like to go. The November work session will be 5:30 start, roughly 6:45 end time to start the regular meeting at 7. And then also, we had a recent conversation with Councilmember Barnwell, more so on the comprehensive plan, but this hasn't happened since I've started, but it sounds like there have been historically work sessions occasionally between P&Z and the council. And so I think we had a conversation about that could be a potential option for, since we're going to have this comprehensive plan update going on, and then specifically with these two topics, housing and marijuana establishments, I think there would be a lot of passionate voices on all sides of whatever that conversation goes. It might be worth having a work session with council so that we're not wasting our time with something that they may, like, we're not going to touch that or deal with that, you know. And so I still think it's beneficial to have these two work sessions, but based on what comes out of that, I'd be willing to talk to city manager's office if that would be of interest for the commission to kind of get the thoughts or direction of council on some of these more important topics.
So just to clarify, you were still suggesting for October 23rd, which will be a full work session, that we have housing with all the subsets and marijuana?
No, one or the other.
One or the other?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
We put them both on here to have
good.
the
I was
discussion.
going to say, that's a lot.
No. We put them both on here because I think one would be beneficial for October, one for November. Let the commission decide what order you want to do that, and knowing the October one will have more time, November
Right.
a little less time.
And even with the housing topics there, we don't have to do all of them in one work session. If
Yep.
the commission feels like, let's address parking, we can dig into that, or building height, or take two of them. But yeah, to do all of them might be a little bit too much as well.
Right.
I'd like to sprinkle in a lot of these housing conversations over the next several months, even year, because that's just, it's important.
What are the wishes of the commission? Let's focus on the next work session on Wednesday, October 23rd.
Commissioner, or Chair Griswold, I would like to do the housing one primarily because I know we were having those discussions about concerns about building height, the some of the parking considerations, for sure. I think when somebody's coming in, there's these applicants that are coming in that they have some concerns about some stuff, but if we're in flux on what building height is or parking lot size or whatever it is, maybe if we can revisit those to be sure that we are either staying with them or going to change them and then move on from there. I mean, I think that seems to be a crux for some of the folks that come in and want to do something.
Time sensitive.
Yeah, it just seems more so to me, you know.
It's really hard because everything we deal with is time sensitive. I know the public is chomping at the bit to comment on our marijuana regulations. They wanted to at the first go, and then they realized, oh, it's just a simple reorganization for clarity. Nothing is really changing, and so they backed off. But we had several very passionate public members who I think would like to see that addressed, as we said, in the fall.
Well, if we're going to the colder season, then maybe building is not as big a deal.
That's what I'm thinking,
Maybe.
because things are changing rapidly in the marijuana realm, and I would like us to be prepared when that comes up. So I would really like to push marijuana first, soon.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'd like to it's been on the list and it'd be nice to get it going. And then I'm passionate about the housing too, and you're right, we can't tackle all these at once, but
So we wanted to put both of them on there just to show they both are important.
Yeah.
We'll talk about them. They're both next, just whatever order.
What we roll
I mean,
into one.
is there-
Just so.
With November being a shorter session potentially, it's like, can you do the marijuana in a potentially shorter, do you want to leave? Because housing, you can pick a small topic to slot into that November, like a small piece, right? Because there's so many. But with maybe marijuana, or that's the question, does marijuana need the full time? Do we want to allow that?
Could we start with marijuana as the lead topic, and then put housing second, so that the public knows if we come at 6, we'll talk about marijuana. And then as time allows, we can also talk about housing.
I think you want to give marijuana the whole session.
Well,
Well, yeah.
as Nathaniel always says, let's fill it up, so if we
Yeah.
have spare time, we can
Sure.
go into it. It is a lot of work for staff, though, to prepare two
Those would be
topics.
two big, broad conversations. I would
Right.
say if we do that, we can focus on the marijuana and do a lot of research on that. And then maybe you all want to identify one or two of those, or,
Of the housing
yeah, just,
topics,
For just in case there's time.
in
Yeah.
case there's time, right.
There you go.
It is nice to maximize our time.
Yeah, have like an extra
Right.
sheet to go to.
I know that ADUs, under our former community development director, Jackie Weil, she had a huge packet on ADUs, if you still have that in your files. But there was a lot of concern about nightly lodging.
okay.
But that would be part of that discussion, I guess. But, yeah,
So-
what are the wishes of the commission? What topic for housing?
oh, I would pick parking in the building height just because of the current cup that we just looked at. And there was some public input on that, and I just think that maybe, I know that addresses more of the commercial aspects, and then the ADUs are probably more of the housing domestic domiciles, I guess, domestic domiciles, so.
I think if we're doing marijuana establishments, I think building height would be a good one to tack on for sure, because we've done a lot of the view shed research from other
Right.
towns, and so we wouldn't have
Right.
a whole lot to do there. And then, yeah, and maybe parking, I think maybe we can maybe put those two on, if that sounds good.
And this is parking in relation to hotels or
Businesses.
triplexes or?
Yeah.
I think we can go through that whole
It's pretty
table on
broad.
code and talk,
Yeah.
look at the
Okay.
ratios for businesses, hotels, and,
Yeah.
yeah, because what hotels 1-to-1, and we've kind of had initial conversations, is that too many? And then what is it multiplexes that are 2.5 cars per unit?
Yeah, and
Which-
that's gonna actually kind of dovetail into the ADU thing too, because if you're adding more housing on lots, you're gonna have to address the parking there too.
Which is a common question when the ADUs come up is, okay, is there gonna be parking here? So it might be
Right.
good to tackle
Right.
parking first. So, yeah, if you're good, tentatively plan topic A, marijuana establishments, continue that conversation. If there's time, look at building height and parking requirements.
Okay. Does that sound good, Commissioner?
Yeah.
So just, do we need to give you some direction on, I mean, what are we gonna talk about as far as marijuana establishment? Is it just the latest of consumption on site, or where they can be located in the future or
Well,
not? And, you know, how we wanna look at that?
I guess, yeah, up to you all. We've, in the previous packet, had the AMCO information. We can re-present that in the packet. Claire's been doing a really good job at researching the code of marijuana establishment regulations in several of the other Alaska communities. And so we can include the information that we found. And then we can include the current land use table and then use that information. If there's other information, let us know and we can see if we can find it, but kind of just use that information. I think it'd be more, again, getting public input, and then at the end of the day, it's just going line by line through the land use table. And, you know, I think it's gonna be a broad conversation, right? Black and white, do we as a community want to have marijuana establishments in Seward? And if the answer is no, that's a pretty simple recommendation. We just scratch it, move it on to council and see if they approve that. If the answer is yes, and then what we've got to do, right, is look at, I think, the 4 main types of establishments that are defined in code, and then we go through those individually. Like, do we see this as a fit for the Seward community? No, easy, strike that, send it on to council. If yes, then we go down to the next order, which would be, okay, where in Seward? And we look at it by zoning district. And so, does this make sense in this zoning district, this zoning district? And if the answer is no, scratch it. If the answer is yes, then we ask ourselves, all the time or conditionally? And that's where you make that decision of, all right, we're gonna put this outright, or do we want to put a CUP for this specific spot? And so that's kind of in my head how,
Yeah.
start broad, just go down,
That sounds good.
Yeah.
down the list and see where we kind of end up. So, because it's not just a black and white yes or no, it's like, okay, there's all that gray, like, we want these in certain zoning districts with a CUP. You've got a lot of options to recommend, so.
And having that reordered in the land use allowed table just is so helpful.
Yep.
Now we can go through it. It's all right there, you know, and line by line, we can see it. Yeah. Does that sound good, Commissioner?
And I would just add, I think the topic of how those marijuana establishments are regulated may not be the most effective conversation for the commission, but just more focusing on what Danny talked about is like where and if we want them allowed in Seward, because leave AMCO to do the finer regulating of how they're operated, and focus on where.
Right.
So we're deciding where based on the current AMCO regulations.
Or how many you can have in the community.
Yep.
I think the public will appreciate having a work session on that.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that topic? Okay, actually informational items, we've covered a bit of that. So just a reminder, the work session on Wednesday, October 23rd is at 6 p.m. in Council Chambers at City Hall. The November 5th, 2024 meeting was rescheduled due to the general election. So there will be 2 meetings on Tuesday, November 19th, 2024 in Council Chambers. The work session will start at 5:30 and the regular meeting at 7. There are no other items. Moving on to citizen comments, there are no public. And moving on to commission and administration comments. Let's start with Commissioner Hubbard. Do you have any comments?
I don't have much, but I appreciate, sending appreciation to our staff for pulling all this information together, and just like getting things done, and looking forward to the work sessions coming up, and welcome any public comments. And I don't know, are they allowed to call me?
Not if it's quasi judicial.
Yeah, right.
But if it's legislative.
We're not there yet.
Yeah. We welcome public comments.
Yeah.
This is where
Except
we
on this
want the
quasi
public,
judicial.
yeah.
We want
So
to
call me.
hear. Yeah, talk to them at
Thank
the
you.
grocery store, the post office. It's really important.
Yeah.
Part of our mission is to reach out. Okay, Commissioner Verhey?
No comments.
Okay. Commissioner Allman?
Yeah, thanks. A lot of great variety tonight. Covered a lot,
Yeah.
and always educational. Just appreciate everybody's hard work. Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
It was a great session tonight between the work session with the cop shop and the expansion on that, or trying to develop that. The ex parte stuff as far as how to run the meetings, because I think that's really sort of important for us, because, we know everybody, and that makes it tough. You're gonna see somebody somewhere, and you don't wanna be rude, but it is what it is. But I really like to send my appreciation to the staff, because invariably they working their butt off to try to just get us set up so we can just run through this as best as we can and move the agenda along and realistically move the city forward with what people want to do in town. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Very good. I too appreciate all the work from the administration, and also technology is not perfect, but it was great to hear from the applicant.
Yep.
In California, it was really important to me to hear his input. And I really appreciate the lawyer, Robert Palmer, putting together this PowerPoint and answering our questions. I think we've done it in different ways in the past, and I hope we can do it better in the future. So having this information is really important.
And thank you for asking all the questions.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome. And with that, anything from the staff?
I'd just like to say thank you. It was awesome. A lot of information tonight. And just keeping up. Now I know where to dig, so
Right.
dig more.
Right, thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 8:54.